Welcome to the studio at That Nerd Show. I am Marcus Blake, and we are speaking with the filmmakers behind the film American Outlaws, which is on the film festival circuit right now. And we are speaking with Sam Strike and the director, Sean McEwen. Thank you for interviewing with us. Welcome to That Nerd Show. I know this is a first for both of you. And we're going to dive in and talk about this film. I literally just got through watching it this afternoon, and I have quite a few questions. So
great. Hopefully we have some answers.
Well, hopefully. First, I didn't realize it was actually based on a true story. I don't remember hearing about this story 11 years ago. So that was kind of interesting. Sean, I want to start with you. How did this project come about? I know it's based off a GQ magazine article, but how did you get involved with it?
Yeah, so I was introduced to the article, and I remember when I first read the article, I remember hearing about the news story. But I think you made an excellent point. You know, I'm not trying to make some great commentary here, but with news cycles and how fast things can be in the zeitgeist and then
Right.
not. I mean, it was one of these weird things where for that 8 days when these three siblings were on the run and on this, we'll call it a cross-country crime spree of sorts, it was all over the place. And then that was it, and on to the next thing. But I remember it kind of had its place and it kind of needled its way into my brain. And then when I read the article, it really painted so much more of a picture and portrait of that there's more to the story than we were just getting these little sound bites.
Right.
And that always makes you kind of go, okay, wait, this isn't a black and white issue. There's a lot of gray here, and there's more circumstantial aspects to it and stuff. And then from there, and here we go. This is, I guess, what we all do as writers, and when we're trying to create things or something, we start going down the rabbit hole, which took me to then eventually reaching out to the actual siblings. That I call them the kids, the two brothers and sister, Dylan, Ryan, and Lee Grace, and they were at the time and still are each incarcerated in 3 separate federal prisons across the country. I wrote to them. I got to know them. I eventually went and met them in person, which was an adventure and experience in itself to do that. And again, was blown away by how much I really did not know about the story, obviously. And then from there, it just kind of evolved into like, man, I think this is a story that needs to be told. And let's see if we can make a movie out of this.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. This is not a black and white story as you kind of get to know these characters throughout the film. And Sam, you're used to playing what I like to call very gray characters. It's not black and white. And I don't know if I want to say that you play the good brother, but your intentions, your character is not really as crazy, so to speak. How did you get involved in this? And the second question I have is, what was inspiring about the brother that you played, if there is anything inspiring?
Yeah, I mean, I got involved. I remember it really specifically. My agent sent me the script and who was attached, and I kind of thought it was too good to be true. I'm a big fan of this genre,
Right?
kind of like a neo-westerny thing. And then I saw that Emery and India were attached, and you get sent things all the time that just don't work out.
Right.
And I didn't have the correct work papers at the time, and I was like, this would be great, but it's not going to happen. But I spoke with Sean, and me and Sean hit it off, and we said we can try and figure out the visa. And before I knew it, I was on the ground filming, which was kind of it was a really quick turnaround from getting cast to being on set. And my approach to the character is, and I think what makes specifically Ryan different from Dylan was that Dylan maybe was a little more erratic, but he was the one that had to make all the decisions, and Ryan kind of got to just say, well, if my big brother says this is what we should do, this is what we'll do. He didn't have the pressure, maybe. I mean, he had pressure, obviously, but not the same as Dylan, where Dylan's the older brother that, he's responsible for his 2 siblings based on the decisions that he almost alone is making.
Right.
So while his behavior might be a little more erratic, I think that Ryan kind of got to wash his hands a little bit of being responsible.
Yeah. Well, I was more drawn to his character anyway, because I mean, his intentions are more pure. I mean, he's backed into a corner being on probation, not a lot of opportunities, about to have a kid. So, it's a lot easier to be kind of influenced by your older brother and go off on this spree and think that it's good and how you can make life better for other people. So, yeah, I know they're classified as criminals. Yes, they broke the law and all that, but there's a lot of different moral issues here about why they did what they did. And as you said, it's more or less about them being together as family when the world has kind of abandoned them. So my question is, and I want to start with you, Sean, is despite them breaking the law, do you really feel like they're criminals compared to other criminals who may be more deserving to be in prison? Did you get that sense from them?
Sure. And I think that's a multi-million-dollar question. I mean, I'm not here to, again, sort of take sides of like, I'll be the judge now in this case. But I think the argument can be made that, I think we all understand, and it's not a perfect system. And I appreciate our judicial system, but it's flawed, just like everything in life is flawed. Everything's complex. And I think that, you look at, how many people are, unjustly accused of things, and that happens. Obviously, we need a penal system for various reasons. But, in that, there's a lot of people that fall through the cracks of society, and they find themselves in those because of circumstantial situations, like, it's environment, it's upbringing. What were their own families like? They grew up in a healthy atmosphere. What was their education system like? What was their socioeconomic status? I mean, some of these things are not meant to be excuses. It's just an understanding of this situation. I mean, I think we tend to forget, and I sound a little preachy, and forgive me, but it's a global community. I mean, we're all part of this. We're all on this big rock hurtling through space together. So I think in particular, I found what was interesting about them is as I started to peel it back, I started to relate for myself, and I hope the audience can pick up on this too. That wow, man, like if I was in a situation like this, and this was my family. Right. And I'd been through all the things that they had been through up to that point. What would I do? What would I be capable of doing? And if the system really wasn't giving me a fair shake, and there were no other options, and the only other option was like for them to be pulled apart and not be with each other, and not even be like for Ryan's character with his own child, it's like, wow. I mean, like you can start to understand and have some kind of empathy, again, situationally. It doesn't excuse. They made bad mistakes. Sure. They'll tell you that. But there's always more to the story, and I think that's where it gets interesting. Is we have to explore what's you can paint in between the lines, but it's what's outside that's where it gets really interesting, and the humanistic part of it.
Nobody can really answer what they're going to do when they're backed into a corner until you're there. What line you're willing to cross. Now, Sam, you talk about that you kind of love this genre, and this is also a question for both of you, but I kind of saw a lot of influence from other films. Like my first instance was, wow, this reminds me of Into the Badlands as a film. So Sam, for you, did you dive into other films, kind of find some inspiration from them for your character that are in the same genre? Do you have a favorite?
Well, yeah, I mean, not to compare them because they're very different films.
Sure.
But like 2 weeks before this got sent to me, I finally got around to seeing Hell or High Water, which I loved.
Yeah,
which was about these two brothers that were robbing banks. And it sounds shallow, but it's the aesthetic of it, and the feeling of it. And I was like, oh man, I'd love to do something like this,
Yeah.
And then when this came along, obviously I saw similarities, but it was clearly very much its own thing, but that specifically, I remember seeing that and going, oh, I love this film. I'd love to do something that was slightly similar. And I'm also guilty of like marrying ideas together that maybe have nothing to do with each other just because I want to see them that way,
Right. Well, yeah, it's funny that you compared that. You look at the cops, and I love the dynamic with Treat Williams' characters and Corey Fredericks is one who doesn't see it as black and white, and one who is so jaded that, well, they're just criminals. We're going to take them down no matter what, and doesn't want to understand. And you saw, you see the same dynamic with Jeff Bridges' character and the other guy in Hell or High Water. I also like talking about that movie because I think, as popular as Taylor Sheridan is these days, they forget, yeah, he wrote that movie. But anyway, Sam, did you get to write to the siblings at all, or get to meet them in preparation for this film?
So I knew that Sean had met the siblings, and he told me that at some point I'd get to speak to Ryan on the phone. And it was myself, Emery, India, and Sean were out having lunch before we started filming. And Sean got up and went away for a second, and then he comes back and he just hands me the phone and goes, "It's Ryan." And I was like, "Oh,"
I'm so sorry.
It was great though to speak to him. But some of the questions that you ask people in your day-to-day life have a different meaning to somebody that's
right
in prison. So I felt really maybe like overly cognizant of what I was saying to him. I didn't want to like upset him, but it was definitely talking to Ryan was really informative for me, but also Emery and India spoke to Dylan and Lee Grace, and they gave their opinions on Ryan.
Right.
So I got quite a lot of background, quite a lot of reliable background, I feel like, going into this for that reason. Yeah.
So we talk about the overall theme of this movie is not about them being criminals, but it's about family and what you're willing to do to stay together. When it comes to talking about family-esque type films, I guess my question for you, Sean, is, there's the really kind of cutesy rom-coms, whatever, about how all family comes together and deals with stuff. Do you think this kind of theme is just as important to stuff like that? Because again, it's about them coming together, even though they're on the run and robbed a bank.
I think that's in a sense what made this so interesting and relatable. When you have these characters, these people that are doing things that aren't relatable. Yeah. Oh no worries. Listen, I've never robbed a bank before. I've never been on the run from the law and been chased by cops and all this kind of stuff. So automatically there is a distance that's put with that. So how can we draw the experience from an audience perspective to these characters and bring us all closer together and have an understanding of these extreme circumstances? So I think that very much so. I think and really what bottom line for me, it was about family. It's the fact that yes, the story had all the salacious bells and whistles. She was a former stripper toting an AK-47, and they're like again running from the cops and getting in shootouts and robbing banks and all this stuff. But it all came down to their sibling bond and family. And family means so many different things to everybody. And there's different, there's no kind of traditional sense of that word probably anymore. But I think we can all relate to that in some point. And I think when we can start to relate and we can start to understand, we can start to, I like to say this, but like even learn and grow within ourselves. Like it holds a mirror up to ourselves for that experience.
Yeah. So Sam, this is what I like to call the film school question. I like to ask actors their process about, especially with other actors, for the ones that are in an acting class looking for a different approach. I know there's a script, but I feel like you, India, and Emery did a lot of improvisation within this film. Just the way you guys kind of bonded together, very different, like real life siblings. You're each a different kind of archetype. So am I correct in that there was, or was that really just straight from the script?
From what I remember, all credit to Sean, I don't think there was an awful lot of improvising.
Okay.
I really don't. I feel like, right, Sean? There wasn't.
I would agree, and I would also disagree. And here's what I'd say. So forgive me. I think you're right. You guys, we really did kind of lay that train track with the script and the dialogue, and these guys were amazing. They stayed with that, and that's as a writer, every word is so precious and it's ridiculous because it doesn't necessarily have to be. And they really did stick to that. However, where the improvisational part came in is what they weren't saying and how they interacted when they weren't speaking. And that was, I think it's the best parts of the movie.
Yeah.
It's not the dialogue. I'd love to take credit and say, oh, well, but it's really was the unspoken, and the little nuanced things that would come up between them when they were interrelating, whether they were in the backseat of that car. For those who haven't seen the movie, I mean, the majority of the movie takes place in this little, what I call pod, that's heading down the river Styx and going deeper and toward the belly of the beast, shall we say. And we're on that ride with them. We're kind of like the fourth sibling in the back seat with Lee Grace or something, is kind of the idea. And I think, there's so much that's going on between them. And then as everything kind of spirals out of control and continues to escalate, these guys were so great about tapping into those real emotions as they interacted with each other. It was brilliant to watch. I can't take any credit for that.
Okay. Yeah, like taking back in off a short, and yourself talking about process. For me, before I did American Outlaws, I had quite a rigid approach to how I worked. I would like plan everything, and I found it would really lock me up. And going on to this film, I was like super intimidated by Emery in India because I respect them both.
Right.
And I said, try something different. Like, go, make sure you know the lines, but like, don't come to set married to this idea that you had the night before. And I think that's what really gave it maybe more of an improvisational element. Like for all three of us, we were all there and we knew what the words were, but just the feeling in the air on any given day would influence the scene and the tone of the scene.
Right. So a recurring theme that we talk about on our podcast and when we interview filmmakers is the location as its own character. And you kind of have multiple characters going from Florida to Alabama to Texas, but then they end up in Colorado. And I feel like that's more of a metaphor. It's the last bastions of peace that they're going to get. They go to this scenery. I know that's real life, but from a metaphorical standpoint and where you pick to film, do you kind of feel the same, that that's why Colorado is maybe a little bit more important as the location or where they end up in the film?
I definitely do. I think you hit the nail on the head. What we attempted to do was to kind of show the world of that kind of deep, dirty, sweat-stained South, and that, off the beaten path, blacktop highway, old school kind of thing that's kind of forgotten. When the new freeways come through, like those old highways are forgotten. That's what these kids in real life, that's how they got to where they were and were able to evade authorities for such a long period of time, actually, which is unthinkable now. I mean, like it feels like we're also trackable, traceable, and everything's so interconnected and stuff. And they truly went old school, and they, just like their granddaddy taught them to, they went and got an atlas and they threw their cell phones out the window, no credit cards, and let's go. And they went old school, and it worked until it didn't,
Right.
So I think the juxtaposition of those two things, of like, they started to see, even though they know it, but they started to really see it in a different light, what, America is, again, to some people, and that lens that it can be perceived as, or even misperceived as sometimes, but it's there for discussion. And then all of a sudden, you're right. It's like they saw the siren. They saw, beckoning them, this Colorado, this idealized, wow, the air is so clean and the streams are so pure, and we can live here. This we can make home. Let's put a stake in the sand here. And nobody owns this. Nobody owns us. We can be free. It's about freedom. They were searching for freedom. They just, what does that mean?
Well, it's funny that you showed, getting an atlas, because I mean, you tell people now an atlas. young people now.
Exactly.
What, is it on my phone? Yes. Before a phone, we actually had to look at a physical map. Somebody printed those. Now, Sam, I mean, you with the different locations that you filmed, you got to see some different parts of America. I know you're from England. What was your impression? Because you guys were actually filming in Colorado, right? You did. Okay, well, that just throws out my next question.
Yes, we would like to have, but we did do a little bit of movie magic there, in the sense that we shot another place for Colorado. But we did, it was really personal. I'll let Sam jump in, but where we decided to shoot, which was wonderful, was Louisiana and right outside Shreveport, for example.
Right.
And it just lent itself to, again, the look and the aesthetic and the world we were trying to portray.
Not too far from where we're located. We're actually based out of Dallas. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So
yeah. So, but then I get to ask this other question. Sam, did you ever, or in your career, have ever filmed in Louisiana before, or was that kind of new to you?
Oh, so I'd been living in LA for a couple of years. And I'd filmed in LA and I had filmed in New York, but I'd never filmed in Louisiana, nor even been to Louisiana. And the something I can say about it, it was an extremely like immersive experience.
Yeah.
You know, for the sake of the film, because I mean, you know, it's very different from LA or New York.
Right.
And it just felt, you know, like, and it's a smaller film. It's like an independent movie, and we're in Louisiana doing this film about, you know, these kids from Florida. It just felt very like you said earlier about the location becoming a character within the film. You know, like I think it would have felt really different had we not.
Louisiana, it's a whole different kind of character too, compared to any other place in the South.
Is it alligators or crocodiles they have there?
Alligators, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We had one of the unit drivers, this fantastic guy, this fantastic accent, and he was telling me about the gators everywhere. I was like, there's alligators just swimming around.
It's wild. Yeah. It's just wild.
I don't have that stuff, you know.
Well, since you did a little filming there, even though it's not New Orleans, I'd be a little disappointed if you didn't get to at least try a po' boy, because they are all over Louisiana. So
I think one of my first nights I had a po' boy.
Nice. Yeah. So American Outlaws. I know the title has been used before, and you know where it really comes from. Did you, Sean, think about either changing the title or using something else, or do you just feel like American Outlaws is just the most poignant to describe what the story is?
I think it really is, and you know, I'd love to give a really like super eloquent, you know, complex answer, but it's what you said. It just felt like it kind of hit the nail on the head. And I think, you know, look, you know, when you're looking at titles, the original title actually was the Doherty Gang, which is Doherty, their last name,
right?
Which also is kind of pulled from the article. But you know, as time has passed and people don't know what that's referencing, and you know, et cetera, it just felt like, you know, this is what they are. Who are they? They're American Outlaws. And what does that mean? And it conjures something. In my mind, it conjures like this, harkens to this, when Sam said, this kind of neo-Western, this kind of like yesteryear kind of feel, this go west, young man, young woman kind of vibe.
Well, I kind of oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just adding to what Sean said, outlaw. It's a romantic word.
Yeah. Well, I kind of found it ironic that, you know, there is an American Outlaws movie about Jesse James, you know, that was done 20 years ago with Colin Farrell and stuff. And, you know, you look at the history of the James gang and the Dalton gang, and these are people who became criminals during the Reconstruction era. They had been backed into a corner with Reconstruction policy, so they just started to rob banks and got their land back. And, you know, were American outlaws, but were romanticized and looked at as Robin Hood-esque type characters, you know, in the South. So that was another reason I thought that was interesting, that you kind of picked the same title of a movie that was about them, that, you know, we can't really judge them totally as criminals because of what they were dealing with, you know, during an oppressive era in the South during Reconstruction. So anyway, that's where I was kind of going with that.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think at the end of the day, you know, in a way, these also were young people, and they were living in their own kind of fantasy about what this could be and what this would be like. And sure, we're going to rob some banks, but you know, it's like the banks are insured by the FDIC, and you know, they'll get their money back, and we're not taking from, you know, mom and pop. You know, we're you know, it's the government, and the government's what's done us kind of wrong by us in the first place, and it's corrupt in its own way, and it's like, you know, so they always, I think that's what also attracted me to the story, was there always was this sense, and it doesn't mean it's fully realized, it doesn't mean it's justified, their actions, but they kind of operated from this, yes, askew, this kind of Southern code of ethics in a way. Like there's a right and there's a wrong. And I found that very appealing and interesting. You know, there is a story of the South in this story in particular. There's a scene, the gas station scene when you know, they overpump at the gas pump, and here they've just robbed banks. They're trying to lay low and all this. And then Sam's character Ryan he's like, hey, I need a couple more bucks because we overpumped. It was a prepay, and and the pump just kept going. This really happened. And they were like, yeah, you got to go back inside and pay that extra few bucks because that's not right. They just robbed banks, and they felt like they can't gyp the you know, the mom and pop gas station out of its few dollars. That's just not the right thing to do. You know,
well, that was a great scene because again, you can't look at them, you know, as these completely corrupt characters because they're willing to give back and not rob, you know, mom and pop. So
yeah.
All right, so we got time for a couple more questions, and I just wanted to ask. I always like people to be able to have a chance to promote what they're doing next. I know this film is premiering this weekend, but Sam, what's next for you after this?
I don't know. I did a movie last year called The Boys in the Boat. I have no idea when that's coming out. About
He's underplaying it though. It's an amazing. It's going to be an amazing film.
It's a really great story about the men's USA Olympic rowing team,
and a real up and coming director. You might want to throw the name out there too.
There's this director, like a few people have heard of it. George Clooney directed it. George
Clooney. Oh
yeah,
that guy. I think I've heard of him. Wait, was he in that?
Yeah, exactly.
You mean the guy that almost ruined the Batman franchise? No, I'm just kidding.
Oh boy. It wasn't his fault. It was those, and I'm going to use this.
Oh, I know.
The nipples. It was the nipples that ruined it. It wasn't him.
I love
that. The nipples on the suit.
He does an interview about Batman, and he like apologizes, even though it's like it's not my fault.
But, so funny.
But that's good. That had to be an amazing experience. So
it was a pretty amazing. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. But so that, and hopefully more with Sean.
Yeah. There's mine, and I'm just not to jump on him, but it actually includes Sam. So I'm trying to darken his doorstep as we speak to do my next film, and it looks like we've got everything pulled together after you know, a little bit of you know, everything takes some time, but I'm really excited by it. And again, it would be an honor to work with Sam again. So hopefully he'll want to jump back in the sandbox with us.
All right. Well, we come to the last question that we ask all of our filmmakers, our very nerdy question. So here you go. If you
so excited.
I know. But one you're not prepared for. If you could have a weapon of choice or a superpower from within the nerd universe to fight the forces of evil, what would you choose? And Sean, as the director, I'm going to start with you.
Oh man, I wish I had a minute to think about this because I'm gonna give such a lame answer because you are putting me on the spot, and I'm such a comic book fan, and I grew up as such a comic book fan. And I can't believe I'm doing this. I mean, listen, if you're talking about, so the objective is to like really truly fight evil in the universe, kind of a thing. I mean, you'd have to be one of the most powerful. I mean, if you're gonna do that, I mean, if you want to just like be cool and, you know, go the Wolverine route and stuff, and just, you know, he's such a badass. I mean, there's that. But if you have to get to the level of like, I mean, truly like a Superman or you know, a God of Thunder or something like that, you know. So again, not the best, you know, probably seems a little too obvious, but yeah, I'd have to do that, you know. I'd have to do that.
No, that's fair.
I think I'd even want to be here. I'll pull this full circle. I personally would want to assume Superman's powers because I would want some of those questions, which I won't bring up, that Kevin Smith had always asked, and how all that stuff really works anatomically, et cetera. And we'll leave it at that. That's what I would like to know. So that would be my guilty pleasure out of hopefully also fighting off all evil. Okay, there's my answer.
That's one of the best conversations in Mallrats, you know, when Brody's asking Stan Lee. So, all right. And Sam, how about you? Now that you've had a couple of minutes, a little bit to think about it.
Oh, correct me if I'm wrong, but with telekinesis, you can fly, right? You can read people's minds, and you can move things with your mind.
Right, in some cases. The flying, I think so. See, now the comic book people on my staff are going to be mad at me now, but moving things with your mind and reading people's mind, yeah, I mean, that's definitely an X-Men power.
Yeah, but flying, I'd need to be able to fly, or it would be a deal breaker. Telekinesis, I'm like a big Spider-Man. I mean,
Right.
I was like big. I read like the Ultimate Spider-Man series as a kid, like religion is my thing. And then as an adult, all the Batman graphic novels.
Yeah.
My thing. But I'd like to be able to fly, but also have like a bit more like value for my money, so to speak. I wouldn't just want to be able to fly.
So now I'm mad at my answer. I have a different answer. Can I amend my answer? And then I will shut up. I'm the biggest. I grew up with Star Wars. I mean, I'd have to now switch over to that. I mean, like to have the power of the Force. I mean, this like mysticism behind what you're doing that really is woven in the tapestry of the entire universe. I mean, I think I'd probably want to start there. So yeah, make me a Jedi. Let's go.
Be a Sith.
Or that, yeah. It's a fine line anyway. And now we've come full circle. Because it is a fine line between good and bad, and that's what American Outlaws kind of explores too. American Outlaws is just like a Star Wars sequel. That's all it really is. If you
that's why we
kind of, you know, in its own way.
You're prepared to answer every question about your film, and then we just throw a curveball at you, and you're like, oh my God, now I got to really think about stuff from my childhood and what I would really want. So yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for interviewing with us. It was a great film. Very much enjoyed it. Very poetic. So can't wait to see what happens with it, and I can't wait to see your film about the men's rowing team and stuff. Hopefully that will get a release date later this year. And Sean, we can't wait to interview you with the next film you're going to be doing. So
thank you so much. Hey, listen, we appreciate your time. It means a lot. Thank you.